to wrap up our 4-part series on how exactly to gather student experience data, which is essential for how you move forward and take action in community with your students. There is a 4th one I want to introduce today, and this one is a little bit different because it's from the research field, but it's still very research heavy. So we're going to think about how to adapt it into a pedagogical, educational space that's not super researchy. So stay with me here. This is going to get a little researchy, and it's going to be worth it. Here we go. So we are talking about Q sorts today, which is a research methodology. But again, stay with me here. So in a research methodology that does Q sorts or Q methodology, this is basically studying participant viewpoints. So participants are going to rank a set of statements about a topic, and this is going to capture that person's attitude toward that topic. This can be used in a couple different ways. So one, it can be used and is used sometimes in the medical field or the mental health field to identify an individual's change in thinking over time, but it can also be used to kind of think about the trends within a larger group or population set where we're identifying groupings of like-minded individuals. So the steps of this process are that you're going to develop the set of statements. There's a few ways to do this. You're going to select the participants, could just be your class or a subset of your class, right? Or your school or a subset of your school. Again, I would think about centering people who have been unsuccessful or folks who have been marginalized in traditional structures or in your school, those whose school is not currently working for. That's who we want to hear from, right? The participants do the Q-sort activity, and then you're going to analyze and interpret the data, which again, we can get real researchy about it, but I'm going to try to keep it practical here. So a couple ways you can develop statements. So you can have a literature review where you're just taking things from educational literature that's out there. You can have written narratives, which could be that you're kind of surveying students about an issue. And so this might be, you send out the survey to all of the students in the school, and it's kind of open-ended, and you use the language of the students to create the statements that then a smaller group kind of goes through and sorts. Or you could do in-depth interviews, and again, use recordings or transcripts of those interviews to use the same language to develop the statements. So a lot of different options. You could do multiple. Statements are recommended to be really important. They're relevant. They're really significant to people. They're particularly meaningful to the people completing the Q sorts themselves, right? The participants you're inviting. They should also be understandable, right? You have to know what the statement's saying. It should be in kind of friendly, accessible language. And you should be there should be some nuance. You should be able to interpret it in slightly different ways. It should be something that folks are going to have an opinion about. If they're like, I don't really care, then it's not really worth it. And you should have both a balance of positively and negatively framed statements. So you get a wide variety of statements that span the continuum of what someone might think about a particular topic. You don't want the statements to skew one way or the other, positively or negatively. The initial task you're going to give students is to sort them into 3 buckets. Now, I think you could just honestly stop here at the end because we're not getting real researchy about it, but I'll give you another option. So this is, what are the statements you agree with or feel relevant to you or whatever, the positive metric is? What are the statements that you're like, I'm kind of neutral about this. I don't have a strong feeling. And what are the ones you disagree or just feel irrelevant to you? Again, you could stop here, but the next option is to go into the Q-sort kind of grid. I can't remember what this is called. Yeah, Q-grid. And typically it's a bell curve, but recent researchers have said it could also be flattened. I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. But this is where we have like the most positive and the most negative are kind of skewed, like +5, -5, or like +3, -3. And they kind of have to sort things. There's more space for the neutral. And so the things that are firmly on the positive or negative side, it becomes very clear. Like I feel very passionate about this. So here's another example on a +3, -3 scale. So here it's like on the left, you can see it's like the distribution is that, but it can be more flat. Totally fine. Then you're going to start analyzing this data. Now, I think this is a great approach. Go back to the qualitative. Do some one-on-one interviews or focus groups with small groups of students and just say, like, for an interview, you might say, why did you select this statement as most relevant? Like, why did you put this here? Why is statement 12 more relevant than statement 4? Whatever that is. So a lot of statements that you agree with fall under this theme. Why is that? And so these are just some sample questions from Jonathan Sandling, but I do think that, you can come up with whatever it is for you as long as it invites students to help you make sense of what they said And again, in the focus group, it might be that you have grouped students who are similar to one another and you're asking them, generally this group said these statements were positive, these were negative. Why is that? Talk amongst yourselves, talk to me and help me understand. Now, Q pedagogy is a specific kind of offshoot of Q methodology or the Q sort research approach. So they're basically taking the data. They're saying that you can take that data within a class and groups of students will kind of be revealed after completing something like this who share similar viewpoints. And then the teacher is going to go ahead and design a discussion that uses that information that this group of students and this group of students have very different viewpoints or whatever. And that's going to be intentionally designed so that students can understand, appreciate, learn from the students with different points of view. So I just absolutely love this idea. And you can think, I'm sure, of 100 different ways that you can use something like this. Again, it can be as in-depth as possible as you want it to be. So I think research uses about 40 to 80 statements. You don't have to do that. That would be super overwhelming to students, right? Use 10 statements and go from there. You can, again, at the 3 buckets, just stop after asking them to do the 3 bucket sort, right? You don't have to get into the grid if that feels too complex. You could even just have them rank top to bottom, put them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. Rank them in order. Something super simple, but the idea of having students make a decision about a ranking or the level of importance or positivity they're feeling about a particular statement, and then knowing where that student stands and why, if you do those follow-up questions, that is gold, right? And it is just, again, providing the structure for that. As you can probably tell, I'm very jazzed about the possibilities of bringing this research method into, the educational spaces and really gaining a better understanding of the student experience. And you can make it your own. If you're not doing research and publishing research, you don't need to follow all of the rules or the structures. Make it your own. But the idea behind it, the idea of taking statements in a somewhat structured way and asking students to rank them and explain that, ideally in a qualitative kind of after part, so good. So let me know how it goes for you. Let me know how you personalize it, adapt it, and let me know what comes from it.